and welcome to Cycling Culture Club Connections. Today I sit down with Toks, the founder and visionary behind Black Unity Bike Ride, London's annual celebration of diversity in cycling. Toks has some massive plans for where Black Unity Bike Ride is going to go, and the story of how he brought it to life is full of colour, vibrancy, energy, and is super interesting. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. As always, let me know what you think, and thank you again for tuning in. Cheers. Good evening, welcome.
Evening.
Good to see you, Toks. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know you're a busy man, lots of projects, lots of things going on. So I appreciate the time you set aside to do this, and it doesn't go unnoticed. So I really appreciate it. So for the listeners who may not know who you are, I guess I know you on the grapevine. I would describe it like we've got friends of friends galore. I think we operate in a lot of the same circles, but we've never met. I know what you do, but I don't even know how tall you are. So for the listeners at home, maybe give us just a little intro. Like who are you? Who is Toks? And what brings you to this seat today, I guess.
Cool. So full name is Tokunbo. Friends call me Toks. What is there to say? So I had a wacky idea about 4 years ago, and that's turned into a significant thing. But my background really is trained as a journalist, worked in the media industry for a number of years, then had an epiphany moment, which was about kind of doing something a bit more purpose-driven. And I got the opportunity to merge a couple of worlds that interest me. And ever since then, I've kind of been in a third sector as a day job doing purpose-driven work, mainly working with young people and youth empowerment. But then alongside that, in recent years, I've been able to do a bit of work in my community and empowering people that look like me to kind of prioritize their well-being and health, and doing that through cycling. So that's a kind of really top line as to who Toks is.
Thanks, Toks. So first correction is getting your name right. That always helps. Toks rather than Toks, and that shows you that you can know somebody without really knowing them. So I think that's the world we live in, isn't it, where you feel like you're super interconnected with people, but you don't really know what makes them tick, the ins and outs, the things that interest them. You can imagine, but you never really know. And I think that's really key. We'll come back to it a bit later, but like that element of community and connection is just something that I've really gravitated towards over the last 12 months, the journey of Cycling Culture Club. And I'm sure a lot of those things will have synergies with what you've been doing, and particularly around Black Unity Bike Ride. So I think before we get onto that, I'd love to hear about your journey into cycling, because for people that look like us, for people that are from underrepresented groups, I've found so far in these discussions on this podcast, but also my interactions with people generally, the route into cycling varies so much. And I'd love to hear your journey.
Yeah, so my journey started as a kid that was handed down a racer, as it was called back then, from his older brother, when everyone else had mountain bikes and I was riding around late in East London with a racer. And that was my kind of, introduction to cycling as a kid, and just literally having that sense of freedom and agency to explore thanks to the bike. I live quite close to Epping Forest, so discovery and adventure was something that my bike enabled. And then I became an adult, and somehow, some way, the bike just wasn't part of my life for a significant period of time. Until maybe 2005-06, I started to commute to my office on a I think it was a mountain bike hybrid. Nothing serious though. It was just A to B kind of thing. Canal routes, quite leisurely. but it was 2019, 18, sorry. I always get the two mixed up because there was two significant things that happened that really resparked my passion for cycling. The first was the wacky idea to do the London Triathlon when I had a 6 week window to train for it. Um, so I got a road bike through Cycle to Work scheme, bought as much not luminous, yeah, it was luminous kit and brightly coloured kit as I could, and then started training for the triathlon, and that was a very uh, adrenaline-filled experience. Um, I don't know if you've ever done a triathlon, but the transition of swimming and getting on your bike, the discombobulation of the mind and everything, it was just wild. But I loved it, and it kind of really kind of reminded me of the excitement and thrill of being back on a bike. So that was the first thing, and then that was closely followed up with another wacky idea. Wacky ideas seem to be the
The
golden thread
trend.
in my story. But yeah, what followed that up is I was a co-founder of a young black boys program supported families to raise sons called Origin, and we would do fundraisers. And this fundraiser was 10 of us riding to Paris with little or no experience. There was a minivan and some luggage and some fruit and some snacks, and then we made our way over 3 days, and that was it. That was the moment. Sharing that with a band of brothers who were all novices, bar one, and that was a fantastic experience. Like the terrain that we covered, the challenge, the the talking in tongues on hills, and then meeting such a wide spectrum of people from Clapham, South London to Paris was phenomenal. So that, and the training experience leading up to that, from being 10 guys who didn't know how to ride in a group together to becoming a lot more of a synchronized chain gang, essentially. Um, and what you learn about characters, what you learn about yourself, um, that really sparked my interest in cycling again. And then the following summer after that, that's when I had another crazy idea, and Black Community Bike Ride was born.
Nice. No, I love that. I think that element of starting off something big that you're not entirely sure you can do is a little bit out of your grasp, a little bit uncomfortable, full of a bit of friction. I think from my experience, those are the moments that you really build intrinsic pathways into something. So you make friends, you make brothers for life in those key moments. And I can think of a handful of moments myself where, you're doing something a bit wacky, a bit crazy, things that other people from outside of cycling look at and go, what are you doing that for? Triathlon is similar, right? Like, what do you mean you're training for three sports? Isn't one enough?
So
Which
true.
is still what I ask triathletes to this day. But then more and more of my friends, people in this community, are picking up triathlon as a way of getting into the sport or a number of sports, and as a way of connecting with people on a different level. I think there's this sort of slightly crazy triathlon community that is, every bit as weird and wacky as cyclists. And Donna McConnell, don't you? Well, and she spoke to me at length about her journey into triathlon and stuff, and it's fascinating. It's not a journey I've made. Um, I'm a really awful swimmer, like really awful, like sink like a stone. So I welcome some tips when eventually we meet in person. But I think these little pockets of people, these little communities are so special, and I think so many people I know have had that pilgrimage into cycling on that London to Paris route. It's just far enough that it can really push even an experienced cyclist. It can push you really far out of your comfort zone. And I love that there were 10 of you, and you became this band of brothers, and you started off not knowing each other, or if you did know each other, not super well, and certainly not as riders. And you don't even have to tell me, but I'd like you to. But, standing in Paris, I'm sure you felt even a much deeper connection.
Oh, Mars, it was surreal because I think there was something around, wow, we actually did this. Like we started out the journey. If you ever saw our first picture, our first training session at the Lee Valley Velo Park, I mean, we were turning up in like heavy like cotton tracksuit bottoms. It was just a mess. It was an absolute hot mess. So to kind of transition from that to novices, that I mean, when we left South London, our I think our bike computer shut down. We were messed up for routes and stuff. There were so many challenges. It wasn't as if the ride enough wasn't enough of a challenge. There was other things that came into play. There were a white van man who just decided to nearly take us out. It was just so many different things. So you're right. When we were riding up to the Eiffel Tower, you felt the euphoria in the group. Like it was a high that is rarely been matched in my life. That feeling of achievement because it was against the odds. It was against the odds. It was such a surreal visual narrative to see 10 black men ride into Paris because they can, right? Um, it was just, yeah, it was just fantastic to share all of that. And it's definitely gone down as a life memory for me without a shadow of a doubt. And your point about learning and knowing people more, that definitely became the case. Although I knew all of the brothers from the work that we did together for our youth program Origin, I learned so much more about them, hanging on to their wheel, or how different characters responded to different stress experiences, or different surprises along the journey. So, like all of that, I thank cycling for being able to provide me with that experience and that knowledge base. And like you said, bonds like that are so powerful, particularly when you're going on a physical journey where you start in one place and you end up in a totally different place. So yeah, that for me was a great statement of intent for what followed it.
Perfect. And what followed it, if I'm not mistaken, was another pretty wacky idea. So Black Unity bike ride, I think 4 years old now. Is that right?
Indeed. Yep. Yep.
So talk to me about it. Tell me about Black Unity bike ride as if I know nothing, so that
Yeah.
someone who has never come across it, who's listening, might think, "Oh shit, I didn't know that was a thing. I'll be there next year."
Yeah. So I had the wacky idea on the back of a very interesting summer. So we were deep in lockdown, 2020, deep in lockdown. There was an urge and need for connectivity. A lot of people were rediscovering cycling as a way of getting in some form of exercise. Um, and the murder of George Floyd happened. And for me personally, I distanced myself from kind of taking in the news around that because I knew I would find it quite triggering. But one night I found myself just taking in a whole load of CNN and I'm watching a lot of footage, and it brought a lot of stuff to the surface, which kind of the energy was rage. But I wanted to do something that wasn't about protest in response to that. I wanted to do something that was about empowerment because I'm old enough to remember Stephen Lawrence. I've been on many marches around racial justice, and it just felt different for me. And I'm not saying, I'm not speaking for anyone else, black or otherwise, but for me, it felt different that I felt quite fatigued marching. I felt quite fatigued asking to be treated with dignity. And my mindset just went to somewhere about wanting to make a statement, actually, wanting to make a statement that was focused on empowerment, that was focused on love, and what was focused on unity. So a friend of mine, Adisa, one of the brothers that I went to Paris with, sent me a ride on LinkedIn, not LinkedIn, Instagram. that happened in New York. Anyway, long story short, that was 10 days. That was like mid-July. And I was like, so cool, so cool. I said, we could do something like that, but we could do it better. And that sentence leaving my mouth changed my life, essentially. So I backed my chat and put out an anonymous post. And 10 days later, Black Uni Bike Ride was born. And I think that the bit that really spun me was turning up to Walthamstow and seeing hundreds of black people with their bikes on time, ready to move. That blew off my head top. So I had that on one side of me. And I'm talking age range was from single digits to senior pensioners with their bikes ready to go, Walthamstow Central. I
On
had
time.
that, yeah, on time, right? I have to stress that. So I had that on one side of the road. And then on the other side of the road, I don't know if you've played Grand Theft Auto, but when you get a bit naughty in that game, a lot of police turn up. And that's what I had on my right-hand side. I'm talking numerous vans, motorcycles, bikes, cars, and a helicopter. So I was like, oh, shoot, this is going to get locked off before it even started. Thankfully, it didn't, and we had a fantastic experience. But the whole idea was really about testing the stereotype that black people don't do this, black people don't do that, black people don't cycle was one of the things that had been banded about. So I wanted to put it to the test. And what we saw was a celebration of black culture. What we saw was testament of love in the community at a time when the premise of community could be questioned. And what you saw was just a spectrum of different segments, different jigsaw pieces of people that look the same but come from very different walks of life coming together and creating this joyful, loud, colourful peloton riding through London. And it was a sight to see. At certain points, the peloton went on for as long as your eye could see. So it's effectively that. It's a celebration of black culture. It's a celebration of unity, and essentially it's a way of inspiring people from black communities to prioritize their well-being, prioritize their health, and doing that through cycling is just an empowering way of doing it. So that essentially is what the concept's all about.
I mean, I think you've bottled that up perfectly. I tell you what, it is interesting though. I was following along as you were speaking and thinking, oh yeah, I can imagine what that first vibe was. And it's interesting that the undercurrent of such a gathering was still police intervention. I don't want to labour on it too much because I think what you've achieved is amazing, but I thought it was both interesting and disappointing, I suppose, that the reaction to black people gathering and doing something for themselves and for their community was still to, I don't know if mistrust is the word, but to still assume that things are going to go awry. And that, I mean, that's quite telling of society, right? And how did you take that? How did you read that? What was the reaction from people? Was there fear? Interested to just get your thought.
Yeah, no, that's a really valid point, Miles. And in all of my 47 years on this planet, that ended up being the most positive experience and interaction I've had with the Metropolitan Police in my entire life. But initially, to your point, because what you have to contextualize here is there was 10 days between concept and execution. To get that level of resource signed off is phenomenal. There was a significant amount of resource that was applied to that on the back of an anonymous post on social media using Black liberation colours. So there was something about what had been interpreted through that related to risk and fear, right? So my initial response was not to make myself known as as the person orchestrating this, because I just thought it would lead to the event being shut down, right? But yeah, as I say, they gave us a very safe passage from Walthamstow all the way to Brixton via the West End. But the irony is, we've never had the same level of support once they were aware that we're about peace and love and unity. So when there was a perception that we weren't about peace, love, and unity, there was significant presence there, overzealous presence there, based on what it actually was. To when when they realised that actually it's an empowering movement, and we should be there as a duty of care around safety, we've not had the same level of engagement. So that speaks within itself. So to your point, how did I react? It was anxiety, because it was thoughts about previous experiences I've had with the Metropolitan Police, which haven't been positive. They've led to racial profiling, strip searches in notorious Tottenham police stations, and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, very much so. I was compelled to even write a letter to the superintendent, because I established that the ride was known as Operation Minorca. It was an intelligence operation, which again speaks volumes about when you see mass engagement of black people, there is an undercurrent of negativity. So to kind of turn that on its head, for me, was a positive byproduct. That when people see us, or people probably hear us before they see us, they may have a preconception of who we are and what we're about. But when they experience it, you cannot deny the joy, regardless of what color you are, regardless of what social profile you come from. You cannot deny the joy and love and unity that that experience epitomizes.
I love that. I love that. It doesn't really matter where you're from, who you are. Once you're in that space, I mean, I've seen the videos. I've unfortunately never been along.
We got
Two
to change it.
years.
We got to change
Yeah, I'm going to put it in my diary. As
that.
soon, are the dates out for next year?
Not yet, not yet. We're still tweaking, but it'll be July, August is that kind of period. But yeah,
I mean, you're gonna WhatsApp me as soon as those dates are confirmed. I'm gonna put it in my diary, and I swear I will not put my holiday over it like I've done the last 2 years.
I mean it's peak holiday season, so I can't blame you.
And the problem is in my household, I don't do any of the booking. My wife does, and she just books stuff and then tells me where I'm going, and I show up. So um, I will do better and absolutely come along. But I've seen the videos, and the energy is unmistakable. The music and the diversity of individuality is just unlike anything I've ever seen in London. I mean, I think most people who will listen to this will agree that London is a hotspot for diversity relative to other places in the UK. But to see it come together on that scale, as a person of color who's never felt particularly like well represented in cycling, is nothing short of mind blowing. So massive kudos to what you've managed to achieve over the last 4 years, and it shouldn't be underestimated. Like the effect that can have on people outside of that circle looking in, like truly incredible. I showed my wife. She's white. She's a massive ally in this space, but she looked at it and she was like, "I've never seen anything like that. It's absolutely amazing." So I think
that is
there's that.
that is it. That is it. What you just said there, the feedback that your wife gave, that was the objective. I've never seen anything like it. That is it. Because the the thing is within cycling or outside of cycling, you wouldn't have seen anything like it. Because we've never, for whatever reasons, we've never kind of collaborated in the way that we have for Black Unity Bike Ride. Like that wasn't just me working in isolation. That was me kind of speaking to a number of different people that had influence in some shape or form and saying, "Hey, let's come together." That's essentially what I did. I kind of brought the salad bowl, but all the different vegetables were there. They just weren't together. And I think that's the epitome of what is possible when we come together.
Yeah, totally. I think that's actually been one of the biggest takeaways that I've found myself on the journey that I've been on, which is there are so many individuals, communities, groups of people doing amazing work in this space, and by no intention, by no malice or anything like that, they work independently, and it feels to me like there's some power to be had by coming together and joining forces and building combined energy. And speaking frankly, I think that's part of what I want to do through this initiative. It's actually, how do we spotlight the great work that people like yourselves and many others are doing in one place, so that people on the outside looking in, be that underrepresented people or otherwise, can look at what magic is being generated in this space and feel inspired, maybe feel inspired to do something themselves, maybe to get involved with what I'm doing or what you're doing, or even just to have a conversation with a friend about it. Like, that's what it's all about. And I think you've managed to do that on such a massive scale, on what I imagine is a fairly modest budget and team.
Oh, Miles. Sometimes it feels like the Bible story of feeding the 5,000. When I think about the resource base that we have, we're punching way above our station, way above our station. But it's a passion project which has evolved into something a lot bigger than that. But you're right. I mean, like, I think one of the key things when I reflect on it, what's really powerful about it is you have avid cyclists, individuals that have been in the space for a very long time, alongside novices, and there is no kind of hierarchy. And I think that is taken a lot of work to achieve that equilibrium. But I think that's probably one of the most unique elements of the ride. Like, you'll have someone riding fully kitted out, lycra, £10,000 bike next to someone riding on a line bike, and it's just cool. It's it's so cool. So yeah, we're driven by things like that. We're driven by the inclusivity of it. But to your point about the resource it takes, I honestly don't know how we've done it. It's just been through people's passion, love, labor of love. It's definitely, that's the tag to use for it, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah. And is it volunteers?
Yeah. So I mean, we started pure volunteers, and then incrementally over time we've been able to bring on kind of freelancers and stuff. But there is no kind of paid staff, full-time salary member. It's all everyone pitching in together where we can. But yeah, if you look at the resource that we do have, financial and labor hours compared to the output, I mean, it's mad. I mean, over the last 4 years, we've probably produced, not even probably, we've delivered over 40 different activations. So whether that's the main ride, whether that's sessions at the Villa Park, whether it's putting on tours to Africa, engaging our community in something like Ride London, you're talking about over 40 activations, over 10,000 people, registered participants in that. So it's significant, you know. But we've got to make it sustainable. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're still in very much startup phase, but we just secured charity status this year. And now it's about, okay, let's professionalize it a bit more, and let's really think about long-term sustainability. Proof of concept, big tick. Do people want this? Do people need this? Is it impacting lives? Do people value it? Massive tick against all those things. Now it's about sustaining, and that's a different challenge altogether.
Yeah. Is there any, I mean, it's a podcast in itself, but is there any like core hurdle that you're looking at sat here on the 4th of November and thinking, ah, man, I really need to solve that to make Black Unity Bike Ride sustainable?
Yeah, and this really, it kind of crosses over my day job to the passion project. So getting the kind of being able to afford the caliber of talent in order to fulfill the potential, because what we've done is on really small resource base, and I'm just thinking, if we were able to get access to more resource, it will be through the roof. We would have been in multiple cities by now if we could secure the level of resource that is worthy of. So I think for me, it's about the growing pains of being able to access the level of resource that you need to fulfill its potential. And I think there's been some kind of inconvenient truths as well that have been quite challenging to accept. Um, I think one of those is about that whole kind of Black Lives Matter narrative, peaking and then waning, and and what the legacy of all of that noise around the black squares actually looks and feels like in reality. But then on the flip side of that, when you look at the community that we're here to serve, I think we've had a really challenging experience where, and just speaking really candidly, is possibly becoming a victim of our own success, because then you set a level of expectation that's high quality, and if you drop from that in any sense of the word, people let you know about it, and people in our community are not shy about telling you about yourself, right? But so you've got this challenge of where you're working on really small resource base, but you've been knocking it out the park, and then there is an expectation to sustain that or actually build upon it. So it's a bit of a weird dichotomy we've got ourselves in. I mean, it's a good problem to have, right? But it's a challenge all the same.
Yeah, totally. I mean, ultimately, it's small business problem, the problem of scale, right? Like, it's how do you take yourselves from a very successful organization now to a very successful organization in a year's time, but bigger? Um, and I think you're sort of touching on that. And, you know, I noticed that you're looking at that expansion plan, for example, so I know you're thinking about multiple cities for the ride. Talk to me about that. Where are you thinking of going next? And again, like, to make that happen, obviously there's a resource element, and there's dialing up what you're doing in London by potentially two, three, four times, which, you know, as a man with a busy day job and a family and stuff, I'm like, shit, like, fair play, but I don't know how you're going to do it. So yeah, tell me about those other cities, and also I give you you can use this platform, however small it is at the moment, to shout out for volunteers, right? Like, I'm sure most
They're our
most people in your
lifeblood.
position struggle for volunteers.
100%. They're the lifeblood of everything that we do. Without our army of passionate volunteers, we wouldn't be able to execute that. Fundamentally, we would not be able to execute it from the very first one to now. But I'll take a step back, which gives you the context around the expansion plan. I came to a realization that I was at a fork road, and I had a choice to make. I could cap BUBR as this thing and just maintain what we've done and keep it on the side of my desk and just kind of sanitize it in a sense. Or I could say, F it, pop the hood and just give it everything and see where we go, right? And I chose to do the latter. So there was something about the fear of getting it wrong that I needed to lean into. So for me, as I've said, I don't want to be on the front page of the Evening Standard, Daily Mail, or any of those publications for a fatality on one of our rides, right? Which is a real possibility as a cycling entity. And if you're dealing with thousands of people cycling at any one time, the risk register goes through the roof. Then you times that by multiple cities, and it's just insane. Um, so that was the context as to actually we're going to go for it. We're going to roll the dice and see what happens. And whatever happens is the legacy of this thing. So that was really interesting as a self-realization. And then it was like, okay, so where should we go? And where we've targeted other cities in the country that have a high density of racial ethnicity and diversity. So we're looking at the likes of Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool as major cities, and we are, developing relationships. in those cities, because we don't want this to be that kind of alien that comes from London and just lands in, say, Manchester and says, yeah, we're here, like some colonizers. That's not the mentality at all. It's all about unity. So it's about building the relationships on the ground, and collaborating, which is something that we've been doing from day one. So yeah, God willing, the aspiration over the next 3-year strategic plan is, by the end of that plan, you'll be seeing it in London, you'll be seeing it in Birmingham, you'll be seeing it in Liverpool, and you'll be seeing it in Manchester. We haven't kind of fine-tuned the how, but that's the vision. For that aspect anyway, in regards to the annual ride. We've also got the BUBR Africa concept, which has been a huge success to date. We've gone to Ghana, we've gone to Rwanda. We sold out our next trip in South Africa before we even put it on social media. So, yeah, I think what it is I'm leaning into the premise of being boundless. I'm leaning into the idea of thinking of the worst and then accepting that as a possibility, but not allowing it to paralyze our progression. So there is something about fear and failure being very real things, very possible things, but don't feed it, don't empower it. If anything, accept it as a truth, but manage the risk around it as much as we can. So yeah, God willing, that's the plan. Is to give more people inspiration, and you know what I've seen firsthand is beautiful. I've seen people come to a BUBR, be so inspired, and set up their own cycling collective. Or I've seen people learn to ride a bike because they've seen the videos, and then 2-3 years later, they're doing 100-mile rides. You know what I mean? It's like, so there are so many tangible byproducts. And if I was able to capture all of the kind of social value that we've been able to achieve, and that's just through my knowledge, and I don't know, I probably know a small amount of the ripple effect. But yeah, what I've really cherished in recent years is the volume of young people, like really young people coming on the ride. And the reason that's so beautiful is because this is their normal. They will know nothing else than seeing the idea of black people en masse on bikes as being a normal thing. So for me, if there's any one thing that is the legacy of that, that's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful achievement.
No, 100%. And I think as a young person, and there'll be many people who relate to what I'm about to say, but you know, you come into this world, this slightly unusual world, and you don't, for the most part, see people that look like you. So to have something like Black Unity Bike Ride as a big figurehead, almost as you know, a tool to show those youngsters what's possible. The benefits of that can't be overstated. You know, we're talking societal, we're talking economical, we're talking generations down the line of black people riding bikes who may not have found the bike without your help, and if they did find the bike without your help, may not continue riding the bike without your help. So that is, as an intangible, I think probably one of the most powerful byproducts that you can take credit for.
I'm a bit of a data nerd.
All
So
right, go on, hit
I,
me.
I'm able to, you know, that was one of the things, right? Because I'm always about where's the so what? Like, anecdotal information is great, but I've been tracking feedback over the years, you know, and it's like I think 75% of our riders, BBR, they've given BBR credit for inspiring them to cycle more and or prioritize their health and well-being. So if you think about that, the starting point was one of the key pieces of data that I remember Sport England providing was only 57% of the black community were considered to live active lives. You know, so then if we've inspired 75% to do more and be more active, that's phenomenal. Over 50% have been inspired by BUBR to join a cycling club, whether it's a black-led cycling club or another cycling. It doesn't matter. But the fact is, it inspired them to do that. So, that's something that 10 years from now, I'm hoping to have real, strong data that proves what we've been able to achieve on a shoestring budget. But what it's testament to, all roads lead back to love. As corny and as 70 I might sound, it's that. Because it's the love that you experience on those rides where a stranger will be prioritizing, do you need support? How are you getting on? You can do it. It's 17 miles, the annual ride. For some people, that's like doing the Tour de France. And for others, it's a stroll in the park. But that's it. If I could bottle that miles, I'll be a multi-millionaire by now.
Yeah,
It's
hell, I'd buy that.
oh mate, it is such a powerful concoction.
Yeah,
Because
100%.
we live in a time where that is so kind of, I don't want to make a sweeping statement, but there is this is quite a transactional and superficial element of how many likes do you have and how influential you are, and it's all really noisy. But to have something that is in real life and you could feel the substance of it, it's quite refreshing.
Yeah, refreshing is the word, actually. I think
Yeah.
in this digital age where it's all sort of a little bit, what what's actually effective, and connections what's effective, and there's no better way to connect with people in your community than in person on a shared experience. It comes all the way back to your 10 brothers riding to Paris. It's exactly that, but on a big scale. It's really good, really good. And I think to move Black Unity Bike Ride away from having a physical home, I can completely understand why that feels like a scary step. But what it allows you to do is be everywhere. Omnipresence is suddenly within your power. And I think there isn't a city in the world that wouldn't benefit from having a Black Unity bike ride, right? Like, some are obviously more diverse than others and will have better attendance than others. But, if you could click your fingers and generate scale, you could see a world where suddenly cycling is not a sport where diversity is lacking, and suddenly cycling is a sport and a pursuit, I should say, that is widely adopted by people of all shapes and colors. And I think that is that's an exciting world for us to sort of help push towards. And I think this expansion is step one, right? And yeah, I'm excited to see what that ends up looking like for you, because yeah, I think it's unbelievably exciting. The promise of that is almost hard to quantify, and is a bit of a momentum piece. If you could see that rolling out, get easier and easier to do as time goes on, as long as you can capture that momentum. And that is, I mean, easier said than done, but definitely, you could see this really becoming like a crazy big thing. And
Yeah, I mean, I've just had to challenge myself. Anytime I feel scared, it's like, why am I not doing that? You know what I mean? And it's like just not allowing the fear of the unknown to control the thinking. I think a testament to that is, alongside everything we've done, we set up an alliance of black-led cycling collectives. Majority were London-based, but some outside London. And that alliance has been together for the last 3-4 years. But now I want to evolve it and take it global, because of our interactions and thanks to the positives of social media, we've been able to connect with like-minded agents of change right across the African diaspora, right? So the question for myself is, why limit a network to just one city when you've got entities in New York, in Rio, in Lagos, in Kigali, in Atlanta, in Amsterdam, Berlin, that want to feel connected. So again, it's that aha moment. We're going through an evolution where the alliance that we started off with being very much a London thing to now being a global thing. So it's just a beautiful kind of evolution of what is possible. And again, it's that kind of metaphor of movement. I see movement as a noun and a verb. So that's kind of what makes BUBR alive, in my opinion.
Yeah, I feel you for sure. And you mentioned Atlanta in your list of cities, and the guest before you, Alonso, he was talking to me about One Love, I think it's called.
Yes, yes. One Love
Which again
Festival.
I've not been to, but it sounds of a similar vein to what
Mm.
you've managed to do with BBUR. And do you see a world where collectives and organisations doing this sort of thing could join under a single umbrella and amplify the work that they're doing?
I think that's exactly the evolution that I'm hoping to achieve, right? Um, and again, it's not about BUBR having ownership of that. It's more about us just having one space where we can all bring our unique flavors and focuses, but there is a sense of connectivity. So almost like a coalition. That's the ambition. I mean, God willing, we're hoping to take a delegation out to the One Love cycling festival. We've been in touch with those guys and hoping to make that happen August 2025. But yeah, I mean, that is the vision. That is the vision. Like, and then for people to be able to connect and for people to be inspired by each other rather than this kind of crabs in a barrel mentality of there's only room for one. And you get a lot of kind of brands and entities that play off different collectives, each other, and But I think there is something about don't prioritize the noise outside. Realize the power that you have together. So trust is a key currency in that, and building trust is something that is not easy because if people are not used to being overwhelmed with love, they're skeptical. They're like, is this sincere? Where is this coming from? What's the catch? This is too good to be true. For us to rock up in Kigali and say to a couple of guys, yeah, we want to empower you, we want to amplify you, and we want to raise funds for you. It's like, wow, like we've never had that experience before. Like this love from our brothers across the diaspora, like this is new. So if we can normalize that, who knows where we'll be from 10 years from now.
Yeah, wow, yeah. I hadn't even thought about that idea that not only have you got to make these connections and build that narrative, but you've got to break down some trust barriers and build that level of intrinsic trust, because it's not often that someone's coming to you giving you something for nothing. And people are skeptical. You're right. It's something we all have to get over, um, and I think as soon as you start broadening that out, that cultural difference starts to show itself as well, right? Like the people of Kigali are going to be different to the people of Rwanda and Ghana and Atlanta, etc. So I think understanding what each of those people and communities need to help them grow and prosper, will be the key to your eventual expansion, I guess. Um, and I also think it's going to be completely evolutionary. Nothing that you put in place now is likely to be the same in 10 years' time. There's going to be a lot of change and for the better. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how those communities interweave and learn from each other and by osmosis, like become better as a collective. And yeah, I think that's really exciting. And it's really inspirational for me personally, because I've battled with my own conversations internally, being like, what do I want Cycling Culture Club to be? How do I want it to fit in? How do I convince people that I'm not trying to take their lunch money? I'm trying to like bring more light to what they're doing. And I don't have the credibility that you have from the years of doing what you do. So for me, it's just understanding that patience is key. Um, Ensuring, as you said very powerfully, that it comes from a place of love and a place of caring and a place of passion, and trusting in the process, knowing that it will come in time when the time is right. So that I think that's really poignant, and that's going to stick with me long after we finish recording here. There's so much to be said from just that one little tidbit there. And but speaking of little bits, little coins to sort of just stay around for a minute, I'd love to know if over the last 4 years of running this event, whether those little moments, those little interactions, little connections with people, there'll be too many to list, but is there any that really stick with you, like little moments of just explosive passion that you've just thought, you know what, that'll always stick with me?
Yeah. There's three quick ones that come to mind, and I'll share them in the order that they come to mind. So I've got two children. My eldest now is just turned 9, and I think it was the first time he did the ride. So we have pit stops every 5 miles. So he does the first 5 miles with us for the last 2 or 3 years. And the first time he did that, the reason the ride starts in Leighton is because that's where I grew up. So leading the pack, riding with my then 6-year-old on Leighton High Road was a very emotional experience for me because I didn't grow up with my dad. It was my older brother that I'll be riding the streets of Leighton with. So to have that father-son moment and knowing that I was changing the narrative within my own family circle, but it wasn't just me and him. We had over 1,000 black people behind us. Priceless, priceless. That will never leave me. And I was thankful that one of my friends and members of the community captured that visually. So that's something that stays with me. I think the next one that comes to mind was one year we have vibe makers. Before they were official vibe makers, people used to come with their big ass speakers because that's what we do. We bring the vibes, right? So someone was, I think it was Solly, one brother that has been there from day one. And we were by Westminster, and he had his big ass speaker blaring out. I can't remember what he was playing, but it was a little white girl who was maybe 9, 10, standing at the side of Whitehall with her mum, and she just started dancing. She started dancing like there was no tomorrow, right? And we were all like cheering her on and stuff, and it was just such a beautiful, authentic human connection of joy. And yes, it's called a Black Unity Bike Ride, but it showed that, it's not exclusively about just black people, it's about joy. And that was a beautiful thing that I remember and I've stored in the memory banks. And I think the third one was when we introduced cycle taxis to the ride for those individuals that have mobility challenges. And the first time we did that, we had one cycle taxi which had for senior members of our community, women that have been supporting and doing community work for decades. But the idea of seeing them on a bike ride like that, you just wouldn't fathom it. And seeing the three of them, plus the cycle taxi driver, cycling through London on that throne carriage that's when I knew I'd done something special. I was like, wow, to be able to achieve something on that scale and bring everyone along with us, regardless of mobility issues or not. Yeah, they're kind of things that stick in my mind as lifelong memories.
Yeah, special stuff that you can always remember, and even on those dark days when you're not sure it's all worth the grief, you can look back and remember fondly. And I've got two actually, so I know I haven't been on the ride, so I can't preach, but I'm good friends with Josh and Corey, who I know you know well. And quite early on in my journey, they sent me through a bunch of images because they thought I'd be inspired by them, and I was. So I think the first one was of a little black girl on the side of the road watching these riders go past, and the look in her eyes was excitement and inspiration and almost a bit of like perplexion, like what is this? I didn't realize this was something that we could do. And I thought that really stuck with me as really powerful because that is the spark, that is the start of an idea that in a few years' time could lead to her attending a ride, and then from there maybe joining a cycle club and maybe becoming a rider. And I think that's really really cool. And the second one was, I think it was maybe last year, you had biblical weather. Maybe it was 20, and I just remember flicking through those photos and being like, you're onto something special when you've got all this whole heap of black people out there, all in their ponchos, and I just thought you've managed to achieve the impossible doing that, and it is just remarkable.
Oh, that's so true. That is so true. And it's quite the irony of black people don't swim, but yet 2 of the years have been monsoons. So yeah, no, you hit a really good point. And you've just reminded me of a memory actually. When we were riding to Paris, by that point we were all in the same kit, looking fairly competent, and we were just on the outskirts of Paris, and we were tired, so we were losing our form. A couple of frustrated interactions were taking place, but something happened. To your point about the black girl picture you saw, I didn't see this myself, but one of the brothers shared it with us. He said we were riding past a young black boy who saw all 10 of us zoom past, and the look in his face, he couldn't believe it, and he just put up his fist. He just put up his fist in reaction to seeing 10 of us riding past, black men, red, black, and green colors, all different shapes and sizes, and his reaction was just like, I've just seen some superheroes, and he put up the fist of acknowledgement, and I was just like, shoot, the truth comes out of babies, you know. It's so, yeah, I can't even find the words, but yeah, when you talked about that picture, it reminded me of that.
It's unfiltered, isn't it? What you get from
Mm.
kids, like there's no more raw emotion. There's no facade. There's no malice. It's just that you get what you get what you see what you get. You get
Yeah.
what you see. Um, so yeah, I think that's some of the pictures where you see kids riding and with their parents, and some of those are the most visceral and the most powerful, I think, when you look back in hindsight. Um, Listen, to be honest, I could keep going for another hour, but I know you got to get back to your own children. So I'm going to ask you one really quick question and then one slightly longer question. So the first one is, my mum's a rider, black woman. She's always ridden bikes, used to ride me to school. In recent years, she's struggled with traffic on the road and feeling safe on the roads, which you can understand. I can't talk because, again, I've not managed to get on a ride. But if you were to say to my mother, she's in her 60s, she's got a bike, but she doesn't maintain it. Like, what does she need to do to jump on her bike next August and come and join?
I, I I think what I can provide as insights in regards to reassurance is that eldest participant we've had has been 76 years old. The youngest is 6. They've all completed the ride, right? So in regards to can I do it? Big tick, 100% you can. There is no doubt about that. For many people that are on the ride, it's the furthest they've ever ridden. So again, that euphoria of doing something that you didn't believe you could do is something that a lot of people tick that box. And I think the best way to kind of um, encourage your mum to be there next year is the food and the celebration at the end. Like jollof and jerk is waiting for her. Like I can't even front, Mars. Like you've earned that. You've earned that plate at the at the end of the ride. Forget the medal. Just bring me the jerk and the jollof, and we're good. That's probably the best way.
Mate, that's going to be my pitch. That's it. That's all it needed. All that needed. That and the music. The music will get her there as well, for sure.
Trust me. You don't even
100%.
realize what you're doing when the music just like, oh wow, we're in Dulwich already. It's wild.
Yeah, it's special. Okay, last one. I asked the same question to everyone that sits here, and I love looking at the breadth of answers. But if you were to give one piece of advice from somebody to somebody from an underrepresented group who's maybe thinking about getting into cycling, or is cycling already and you want them to stay in, or is maybe like a bit worried to get into cycling? What's that piece of advice?
What's that piece of advice? I think on our website we've got a page that highlights all of the different collectives within the alliance. And my one piece of advice is find your tribe through that. Because the beautiful thing about the alliance is that there are so many different types of groups in there. There's gender-based groups, there's faith-based groups, geography-based groups. So, like, whether you like to go at a leisurely pace, a super fast pace, there is something for everyone in there. So my advice is to just click on their Instagram page and gravitate to the one that you feel resonates with you. And before you know it, you'll be there on the ride in early August. Yeah, doing your thing, So for me, I think it's just we have so much choice now that we didn't necessarily have less than 3-4 years ago in regards to feeling recognized and feeling secure. So yeah, I think that will probably be my one piece of advice for anyone who's kind of anxious about it. Tap into those collectives that do great work. I mean, those guys, we do something large scale, but it's a one-off. Many of those guys that run those cycling clubs and collectives and crews, they're doing it through the love, and they're there every week, sometimes multiple times during the week. And they're the kind of life source of this movement. So that's what I'd recommend.
Thanks, Toks. That's a perfect way to end this. Just as your child comes to see whether you're done yet.
Come on, say hello since you're here.
Hello, special guest on the podcast.
What's your name? Tim.
Welcome to the podcast. Toks, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. I can't tell you, the amount I've taken just from an hour's chat with you. As soon as we get off, I'm going to drop you a message and I'm going to buy you lunch and we're going to continue this chat.
Definitely.
I really appreciate it, and keep up the good work. You've got no idea the amount of impact you're having. And I can only imagine what that's going to scale to once you do more countries. So, big respect. Big respect.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And we'll see you soon.
Definitely. Peace.
Have a good evening. Peace.